welcome to another episode of Two Who's Review. I'm Alex,
I'm Fitz.
and today we're going to be looking at the Season 2 premiere, New Earth. It's the first regular episode of the show starring David Tennant. Um, it's interesting, to say the least, I think.
I quite enjoy it actually. I don't know. Maybe there's issues with it that I'm not registering, but for the most part, it's pretty solid. I don't know if I'd say there's anything really, super exciting or groundbreaking it's doing, but it's a nice, solid story, and it's got some really lovely, just emotionally satisfying moments. The ending in particular, I think, is quite powerful for me personally. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's not
yeah.
without its moments. I think
Hmm.
that it's largely those moments the episode's remembered for.
Hmm.
Uh, I have my own issues with basically the larger story of the episode. I think that
Hmm.
there are some uh, pretty big leaps of logic you got to make in certain parts in order to stay on
Hmm.
board at certain points.
Hmm.
But overall, I think it's a solid enough first episode of a season. It's certainly not the level of quality where anyone who was still on the fence about David Tennant's Doctor is going to turn the episode off halfway through and go, "I knew it. The show doesn't work without Eccleston. It's rubbish."
Yeah, he's given like a good deal of not just like number of things, but like the things he does do are quite interesting, just from a writing perspective, and his performance is great as usual. So,
Yeah, it's also a sequel episode to The End of the World.
mm,
In a lot of ways, actually, this episode really calls back to that one quite a number of times.
mm.
Even thematically in certain parts. I mean, it sort of goes without saying with Cassandra's presence. But
Oh
they
yeah.
they call back to the sort of themes introduced in that more than I remember them doing. I think
Mm.
maybe it's just because of the rather the extremist stuff that you pointed out with Cassandra's character when we discussed that episode last
Yeah.
time. Maybe that stuff was more in my mind when I was watching this one
Hmm.
back.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I think that's sort of the B plot is where those themes come in. There is a sort of larger A plot that doesn't really focus on that stuff, but they do sort of tie in,
Mm.
I guess, a little bit by the end. The two threads do kind of overlap.
Mm.
When the doctor's like, oh, it's a new race of species. You can't deny them, Cassandra, because you're a racist and you still helped make them.
Mm.
So take that. Um,
Mm.
I don't know. I don't know. I think I was kind of conflicted on a number
Mm.
of things when watching it back today
Mm.
before we sat down to record this.
Mm.
This is going to be an interesting conversation because I don't think I quite know where I land on this episode at the moment.
Hmm.
Maybe, hopefully, this discussion can help flesh things out a bit.
Yeah, sure. Um, yeah, no, I'm glad you brought up the Cassandra stuff because that's when it really um it becomes it's at its meatiest, I guess. Certainly thematically so, but it all just kind of works in with the plot. Certainly by the end, like you get like I um like the line, "Oh my God, I'm a chav," like that seems like a throwaway comedic line, but I actually really like that because yes, it's funny, but in a way, and I don't know how intentional this is, but it kind of shows that even 5 billion years
Yeah.
into the future, the British, particularly the British class system, is still going to exist.
Well, I was going to
Um,
say that. It's interesting that Chav culture lasted 5 billion years.
but it but that it kind of works into the larger thematic picture they're painting here
Yeah.
because you see the way that Cassandra views and treats people she considers inferior, particularly the sick people and Chip.
Yeah.
And there's that great bit where you know she uses a psychograph and she goes into the body of this sick person, and she goes back into Rose's body, and she just sits there astonished that this is how other people live.
Yeah.
A very obvious extreme example of that, but still it fits, and it's just a really nice bit of character growth, and just a lovely little pause in the story to help us really, feel the weight of those themes, and it all gets tied up in the end when she finally goes into Chip's body, and it's interesting actually to see her go from being in Rose's body, thinking, "Oh, I don't want to die," and then when she's in Chip's body, she kind of accepts it, and I
Well,
don't
yeah,
know.
that was going to be one of my things. It's an incredibly quick uh, turnaround there.
The weird thing is though with that, I can understand why that may bother somebody, but it doesn't bother me that much because the way I interpret it is now that she's been in the mind of the sick person and Chip himself, she can kind of see, um, oh, okay, maybe. I mean, how shall I phrase this? Like doing those things helps her accept her own death, basically. Um, and then you get that great ending when in Chip's body she meets herself, and it's just a really lovely bit where like the bit where she says, to herself, you are so beautiful. Like it's just it's like somebody seeing who Cassandra is for the first time rather than just this sort of showy, oh yeah, isn't life beautiful with all my rich friends sort of situation, which again I think kind of needles the kind of again a very British class system. So I think um, those things alone really endear me to this episode.
Yeah,
So
I mean, if
yeah.
if nothing else, it does a good job humanizing the specio-fascist
Yeah.
in kind of
Well.
a believable way. Like I
Hmm.
mentioned, I was going to mention it a bit later on, but it's a great moment when she goes into the body of the infected.
Hmm.
Uh, it's a nice moment for her because I think it's really is her experiencing empathy for the first time,
Hmm.
at least that we've ever seen.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's a big turning point for her character. I think there,
Hmm.
and it's nice that the episode gave her that, especially for a character that after her on-screen death 13 episodes prior, I don't think anyone expected her to return.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's weird that you like. I hate that because this is like it's not. I don't necessarily blame this episode specifically for that, but
Hmm.
it's there's a reason. Like I just hate like the mentality of we've. I have no idea how to explain this. It's largely irrelevant to the overall discussion, but like when you see a character explode on screen and then next season they're back, it does sort of foster that mentality of we've seen a character die, but they might come back, and then you sometimes get like the toxic fan base being like, bring this character back,
Hmm.
even though it
Hmm.
doesn't make any sense narratively or thematically, and and I've done a bad job explaining my grievance with that side of the fan base. Uh, but yeah, I mean, it's when you set the precedent of when a character dies on screen, they can come back.
Hmm.
It sort of lowers the stakes a little bit in my mind,
Hmm.
but we do see her die in this episode pretty like definitively. We see her body vaporizes and then she dies after that as well. There's no coming back
Hmm.
from it.
Hmm. Yeah, and well that issue of having a rabid fan base wanting the a villain to come back, or even the producers wanting to
Mm,
bring a villain back because I think that's what the public wants. That's the thing that's I think cropped up a fair bit
yeah.
in Doctor Who. We're going to talk about it when we talk about Destiny of the Daleks. That's a
Oh
whole other
yeah.
thing.
Mm-hmm.
But because Doctor Who's been going on so long, and because we've had so many recurring villains, the Daleks in particular, um, that's at this point it's almost kind of expected. Like I
Oh
remember,
yeah. Like
mm,
I just want to say, I
I
don't have a
think it,
problem
I,
with recurring villains or characters. I don't mind that at all. But like my like there's always sometimes like there's the mentality of if you don't see a character die on screen, they didn't die. And like, well,
mm,
no. Sometimes that's just not the case. Sometimes they just don't want to show a character dying on screen for any
mm,
number of reasons.
yeah,
There could be. It's not necessarily that they didn't show the character dying. That must mean they
mm,
survived. That's
mm.
the kind of thing where I'm like, no, shut up. They made the
Am I-
choice, And if they want to bring
and
that character back, they're well within their capabilities of doing so. But it's not just because we didn't see it.
yeah, I mean, and a lot of those decisions when they're made, they're done retroactively. Not all of them, but a lot of them. But even if you look at again the Daleks, there's the now unfortunately mostly lost story, Evil of the Daleks. I say unfortunate because I've listened to the audio version of it and it's great. But I think it might have been either the director or someone who worked on the story. And I think, I mean, I know I've mentioned this documentary again and again, but I'm pretty sure it's in the Dalek tapes. But
Yeah.
something happened where basically the Daleks look like they were completely finished. I'm pretty sure that the Doctor even says, this is it, the end of the Daleks, because Skaro, the main city, basically just blows up, and but then they thought, oh no, you can't get rid of the Daleks. It's the favorite villain. You've got to do something to show they haven't completely died. And I think the solution was like have this one shot of the Dalek Emperor with a little light bulb still flashing in its core. It's like, oh, I guess they're still alive then. I mean, admittedly, a little bit different with the Daleks because they're mainly this sort of seemingly unstoppable force. Um, you, I don't know about you, Cuff, but I'm not terribly bothered when they just come back because I think, oh, okay, well that's
No.
just part of the show. Having said that, I do kind of see what you mean. Um, Even like with small villains that aren't as established as the Daleks, when they just come back, I can understand why that might be a bit frustrating.
Yeah, well,
Um,
it's
yeah.
always there's always like exceptions to the rule,
Mm,
and in this situation I don't terribly mind it because like Cassandra's death in End of the World was really more of an afterthought than anything else. But like
yeah, a
you know,
little bit.
yeah, like her knowing that she survived being ripped apart by the heat doesn't ruin that story any more
Mm,
than anything in that story ruins that story.
mm.
But
Yeah,
yeah, we've
and
gone a bit off topic. Do you want to get
yeah.
to the timescales?
Um, all I'll say on this other topic again is the way they worked it into the plot, saying, "Oh, okay, well the brain survived and they took, more skin from her body." It's explained well enough, I
Yeah, sure.
think, where it
Yeah,
doesn't. It's not
yeah.
insufferable.
It's not
Um,
the worst way they've
yeah, no,
bullshitted bringing a character back.
no, that is very true. Anyway, yeah, but that's just what I wanted to say about it.
Okay,
So yeah, we
cool.
can head to the timescales.
Yep. So out of 206 votes, this story has an average rating of 5.8.
I'd honestly go higher. I feel like again we'll get into some of the perhaps leaps of logic as you've mentioned, and there were small moments that did crop up in my mind, but for me those moments seem to be more nitpicky than anything else. But we'll get into that. But yeah, I would have put it higher, certainly on a basic engagement and enjoyment level. Even if, as we've often said with Doctor Who, both the classic and revival, the sum is greater than the whole. I still, yeah, found it more entertaining than what's basically a six. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I still don't know
Mm.
really how I feel about this story overall. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting. I'll be curious to see where I land in terms of like agreeing or disagreeing with this rating once we get to the end
Yeah,
of the
sure.
discussion. This is the fifth lowest rated a 10th Doctor story.
Um, Again, it's been years since I've watched it consistently. I want to
I
say that simply because there's so many amazing Tenth Doctor stories, but I
Oh no,
don't know
yeah,
if I have the.
no, I definitely I agree with most of the stuff that's rated above this. That they are certainly better than this story. And
Hmm.
if this is the fifth lowest rated 10th Doctor story, then God, that's an amazing tenure.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I thought it might be interesting. You might be interested to know the four stories rated lower than this.
Sure.
Uh, in order from best to worst, we have Evolution of the Daleks, The Lazarus Experiment, The
Hmm.
Idiot's Lantern, and Fear Her.
I'm surprised Love and Monsters didn't show up.
Love and Monsters
Um.
is not that much higher rated than New Earth, and look, we'll be discussing Love and Monsters in a little bit. It's
Yeah.
still always to come. we might be getting a couple of guests on for that story. One
Mm.
of whom I know likes the story, one of whom I know hates it.
Oh,
So
that's
that'll
gonna be
be.
great.
I'm looking forward to that discussion more than watching the episode itself.
I don't doubt that's gonna be a very, very exciting time. God, that's gonna be a bit wild.
Yeah, so we have
Fantastic.
a 5.5 for plot, which to me I think is pretty on the money. Like the story itself is a good one, but you do
Mm-hmm.
have to suspend a lot of disbelief
Mm-hmm.
in order to get it over the line, which does sort of drag it down. There are some
Mm-hmm.
things that I can't really marry in my head about the story, so I'll get to them later on. But I think
Sure.
5.5 is about where I land with it.
Again, I'd go a bit higher than that. I found the story itself to work fairly well. Certainly, like I said, I think it was mostly that sense of emotional satisfaction I had at the end, where everything
Yeah, yeah.
thematically and plot wise just sort of tied together and got quite emotionally powerful. So for me, the plot didn't bother me that much, but we'll see how I
Mm-hmm.
feel by the end of this.
6.7 for acting. I mean, I'd certainly put that higher, regardless of how I feel about the story itself. No one's doing a bad acting job in this. I
Yeah,
think the
I
one thing you
agree.
could probably say is that some of the death moments are kind of over exaggerated and uh, well, it's either when a character gets infected by the host or the flesh, whatever they're called,
Hmm.
they either go really really overboard with it or they do nothing with it.
Well, yeah, I mean, some of the performances and the style of the show generally, certainly at this point, it is kind of leaning into the campy element a little bit.
Yeah,
I think I said one of the issues with Eccleston's run was the show didn't quite know exactly what the target audience was. It tended to shift even in terms of content, which is a little weird.
yeah,
That seems to be resolved fairly definitively in this episode because you'll notice that there'll be moments where they almost swear, but they swap it with a normal word, and it's like, okay, this is all right. This is the audience.
yeah.
They're
That happens a couple of times.
yeah, like instead of we've gone from what are you, Cassandra, just a bitching trampoline to I can't wait to get my revenge on that bit rich, isn't it? Okay, right. This is what we're doing, isn't it? Is it?
Yeah,
So, but that sort of ties in with the performance as well. It is they do kind of emphasize the campiness of it. I'm quite fond of that though. I love the and like you can tell this was a fun bit because they put it in the trailer I think for this season. But when um I forgot who it was, but one of the nuns is like, who needs arms when we have claws? And it's like, okay, well,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
just one of those great little, again, melodramatic Doctor Whoisms.
yeah. I mean,
I really get a kick out of it,
well,
frankly. But
you can tell they're still struggling a little bit to sort of land the sweet spot between
mhm,
the campy nature of the show used to be and the 2006 audience that they're trying to attract.
hmm.
I think the balance is a little better in this than it was certainly in early season one.
Oh
I
yeah,
They're
yeah,
not going to firmly cement the tone and style they're going for until I want to say like season three is when they really like
yeah,
start hitting it properly because
yeah.
there's a lot of moments especially towards the back half of this season that just do not gel with a lot of what they're trying to do, but we'll discover them in the
Yeah,
coming
yeah,
months.
yeah, for
It has
sure.
a 6.1 for effects. In general, with this episode, it sort of falls into two camps. If it's done practically, it looks incredible. If it's done with CGI, it doesn't.
Yeah,
So
it's
whenever
mm,
anyone gets infected, whenever the infection gets cured, the
mm,
flying cars in the beginning, the robot spider, even the effect of Cassandra switching into different people, they don't look very impressive. But
no,
I am forever going to be astounded by the fact that they made the face of Bo Prop and that it looks as good as it does.
mm,
Like that thing is a masterpiece of
yeah, it's pretty damn
practical
good.
effects. I'm almost thinking they brought back the character and consequently wrote the Captain Jack story specifically because the prop was so good and they didn't want it sitting around after having been used in 15 seconds of screen time in the end of the world.
Hmm. It's yeah, it is very impressive. And even the infected themselves, they do really look, riddled with disease. It's quite wonderfully icky practical effects.
Yeah,
Incidentally, this would appear to be the second time that sort of a horde zombie enemy is in Doctor Who after the gas mask zombies. Um,
yeah,
and I think like the idea of of infection, and you've got them sort of shambling towards people like a horde. And there's that one bit with where there's a shot where they're sort of scraping at a the glass door, and
yeah,
I'm
definitely.
fairly convinced that that image has just straight up been ripped from Dawn of the Dead, because there's a similar image in that movie as well.
Sure.
Um, so I think I have to believe that was deliberate. I have to believe that they thought, yeah, there's some similarities to zombies here. Let's play that up a little bit. And certainly after a movie like 28 Days Later, which sort of I think really, if not began, to certainly popularized the idea of zombie um, creation as infection.
Yeah.
I think it's hard not to draw those parallels, especially given that 28 Days Later, I think, came out only 4 years before this episode aired. So,
Oh, certainly,
yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
And finally, it has a 5.5 for replay value. I'm going to say that's about right as well, because it's certainly an important episode in the context of a larger narrative concerning
Mm, mm,
a bunch of stuff that's going to come up. Like, it introduces the concept that the Face of Bo has something, some important connection to the Doctor. It carries on from a previous episode. Um, it's going to become very important to having New Earth established. It's going to be very important for Gridlock in season
mm,
3, which becomes very important for that series finale. However, I did like this episode more on previous watches, so
mm,
like in that sense, it has kind of diminished. So
mm,
I think it's sitting at roughly the correct rating for replay.
mm. Um, yeah, this is a bit hard to explain, I guess, but like I would put it a bit higher, but I'm more in agreement with that score than the rest of them, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, okay, let's jump in. Um,
Yeah.
minute one, Rose is annoying me. Even before the opening credits roll, Rose does something that it irritates me. Um, Mickey says "I love you" and she says "bye."
Yeah, where it's that part of the program again, but I did wonder, what your reaction to some of Rose's actions are
Well,
in
well,
this story,
honestly,
because
like the rest of her actions, I really don't have a problem with. Like aside from that one moment, it's not a bad Rose episode. I mean,
mm,
I think it's funny that that is largely because she's not really in the episode that much.
yeah,
But
yeah,
when she is there, she's not doing anything particularly bad in my opinion. Like when
mm,
she goes down to the basement and Chip's there, she's clearly wary and she picks up like a metal pole thing to defend herself. That's fair
mm,
enough. Like
mm,
she has no reason to think this isn't Ward 26, but it looks so starkly different from the rest of the hospital.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
it's a fair enough action. Um,
mm,
and even when Cassandra's possessing the Doctor, she's then Rose is then making decisions. You know, rather albeit a rather obvious decision. You're stuck in a room. There's a ladder. You climb the ladder. But she is taking
mm,
proactive steps in the story when
mm.
she is there.
As
It's
opposed to what Rose gets captured or trapped.
Well, she does get
Um,
captured or trapped this time in her own body. So
mm,
it happens again in this story, and she's trapped for a bulk of the episode. So we continue this. We continue the count. I forget what we're up to at this point. Uh, I'm just gonna. I'll figure out for next recording, but just for now, ding, another Rose gets captured or trapped tally added to the score. Um, but like I said, like largely don't have a problem with her in this story. It was just that one moment with
mm.
Mickey where I'm like, come on, you've supposedly learnt your lesson with him by now. Either commit or cut him loose.
well, the one thing that and again, as I've often said, the Rose situation doesn't bother me nearly as much as it does you. But the one bit that did make me raise my eyebrows a little bit was the fact that, as you say, it opens with Rose saying goodbye to Jackie and Mickey. She kisses Mickey goodbye. They go off in the TARDIS, and then there's that kind of it does make you feel sad where you just there's that close up of Mickey just watching the TARDIS
Yep.
disappear, and you think, oh, okay, well,
We're back
that's
to this.
unfortunate. Yeah, and then
He's lost his
but
character growth from Boomtown. He's now back to pining for Rose. Thank God he's getting proper and permanent character growth soon. Like, the show's finally going to start treating Mickey right in a few episodes from now. But Christ, we've gone on a long journey to get there.
but yeah, so that happens. They arrive on New Earth, and then like then Rose says, oh yeah, no, back on
Platform 1.
on platform. It's like that was our first date, and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, okay, and I had
Yep.
to, and I did have to actually just sort of rewind and back through the timestamps again just to make sure I heard that right because I'm like, okay, she
She's
said
called it a
that,
date now. Yeah.
um, and they obviously allude to the fact that she's
Into the Doctor.
she's interested in the Doctor several times, and I'm like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, again, it doesn't bother me like it does you, but I'm thinking, yeah, this is probably one of the reasons why Cover's a little bit annoyed.
Yep.
Uh, yeah, just it is what it is, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, nah. I mean, look, like I said, a lot of those. I mean, strangely, a lot of those elements I don't have a problem with once Mickey sort of leaves and goes to the parallel world. Strangely, a lot of that stuff kind of gets subdued after that, and
Hmm.
they are largely until Rose's actual departure episode treated more just like a close friendship. They don't really play up the
Hmm.
romantic stuff that much
Hmm.
in subsequent stories, which is weird because they only do it when Mickey's around. So I,
Hmm.
odd choice, but it's one you've made, and it's why Rose is terrible. Um, but moving on from that, like we've got the Rose stuff out of the way early, which again is probably good. It's not going to be looming over the rest of this discussion, because like I said, it's not a particularly uh, eventful episode for Rose herself. She's largely there as a conduit for Cassandra. Um, the concept of New Earth is, I think, it's largely one that makes sense. Uh, it the Doctor summarizes it like the Earth gets destroyed and then suddenly there's a big nostalgia wave, which 100% would happen.
Yeah,
100%
I'd believe that.
But calling the city New York, it's way too Futurama for me. Like it's literally a joke that Futurama made 6 years before this episode came out. Um, I don't know. Like I think they would just call it New York. I don't necessarily believe they would call it New York.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, maybe because it's part of the whole nostalgia wave. It's like,
Maybe,
the
but
Earth's
then
been destroyed, and they're so nostalgic. Like, yeah, we got to give it this really obvious name so everyone, will come and enjoy a fun time on New York with the apple grass and whatever it is. So
yeah, I do especially like
maybe
that
that's part of it.
they did they went sort of out of their way on certain points to make it clear that they didn't like take New Earth from any like uh native inhabitants. I want to say like all the Doctor says is they put the call out and then the human race moves in. Like he would have 100% mentioned if there was like a previous native race on New
Yeah.
Earth. And I was largely I think maybe the first time I was watching this I was largely expecting that to be the who the infected underneath the hospital. I was expecting them to be like the subjugated native race of the planet, which would have, I think, made for a more interesting story in a way than just being sort of a clone batch that are given these diseases. I don't know, but it's probably all for the best a good thing that they didn't go that route, because then it would
Mm.
have had odd implications. I mean, it would have just ended up being the story that I pitched when we did our season run, where it's the human race that are the invading bad guys the Doctor's got to stop.
Yeah, and that's like a whole other thing.
Yeah,
Like
you really
it's
need
that's
to.
so
You really need to.
thematically heavy.
Exactly. You really need, you need to make that the only focus of your story if you're gonna do that. You don't have to
Yeah.
also involve this hospital.
Yeah. Like you could do like in terms of having this conspiracy where a whole species is being subjugated. It doesn't necessarily need to be a hospital setting. It could be almost anything.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Um and then yeah, like and it would go like as I said, I like the fact that they go with this sort of class angle here, but like if they did that other idea, it would be deeper than that. It would be like, oh, it would be crazy. So yeah, you need to
Yeah.
devote like a whole episode to that. So
Definitely.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
probably better they didn't go that route. It like they maybe could have pulled it off, but yeah, probably better that they left it alone.
Mm-hmm. Quick thought, just about New
Hmm.
York again. It is interesting that like basically everyone in the hospital who are assumedly inhabitants of New York, they're all British
Hmm.
except for the Duke of Manhattan.
Yeah, that was funny. I just I don't know. I just thought, oh, I guess this is the future, or but oh, I guess that means the future is British,
Except for the Duke of Manhattan.
except for the
It's
Duke of
it's
Manhattan.
such a strange
Like,
choice. Like, just make him British. Everyone else is.
yeah, or just yeah, even with because they more than likely just got like an English actor to do an American accent, but like,
Oh, almost
what's
certainly.
yeah, but like, what's the point? Yeah, it's a little
You
odd.
can't call someone the Duke of Manhattan and have them be British, even though everyone else from New York is British. What we
Yeah,
just selected the one American sounding person. I don't even think it's a New York accent. It was just like a vague
yeah,
American
just a vague
accent.
American. Yeah, it's this is New York, not the Duke of York. So it can't. I guess that makes sense.
Or maybe that was the mistake. Instead of Duke of New York, it was New Duke of York.
Anyway, that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is a little odd because yeah, they all yeah, because I don't think there's a single other character that speaks in anything other than a sort of a British accent, but
Yeah.
or some variation of a UK accent. So it is a little odd, but
Yeah.
there you are, I guess.
But we do have the conspiracy of the hospital,
Hmm.
and it's something that Cassandra discovers and wants to leverage for, again, money, which is her motivation from
Hmm.
the previous story as well.
Hmm.
So at least that's consistent. But we have this hospital. They can't. All the advanced viruses of the year 5 billion. They're getting on top of them, so they decide to breed a human clone race under the hospital and infect them with every single disease in order to have a testing batch for coming up with antidotes and cures for those
Hmm.
diseases.
Hmm.
Despite the fact, like, here's my first grievance: it says every disease, and yet none of the infected appeared to have the stone disease that the Duke of New York had.
Hmm.
I guess that was a,
Hmm.
it's a non-dominant virus,
Hmm.
but even though it very clearly affects inward and outward from the Duke of New York, the
Hmm.
Doctor's very much like he'll be a statue soon, so it clearly
Hmm.
affects every aspect of your body. But
Hmm.
none of the infected have it. They just have like mild boils and
Hmm.
uh, you know uh, discolored veins and patchy skin.
Hmm.
It's odd to show us three separate future viruses that affect the skin physically, and then have none of the infected be showing those symptoms, even though those are the ones that they need to
Hmm.
cure. That I was like, there's not going to be a cure for. I forget what the disease is called, but the Duke of New York's disease. There's not going to be a cure for that for hundreds of
Yeah,
years.
petrifold regression. Yeah.
Petrifold regression. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think,
Yeah,
yeah, didn't you say, is it 1,000 years? He
a
said,
thousand
yeah,
years,
like,
something like that. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. But that was
yeah.
the first thing that took me out of the episode. When it's like they've
Mm-hmm,
been
mm-hmm,
infected with every disease. Well, no, they
mm-hmm.
haven't. I can see that they haven't.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, like, I guess that makes sense. I think, I don't think I latched onto that specific problem, but that did sort of, um, those sorts of things were sort of, I think, bubbling in the back of my mind, because, yeah, like, why wouldn't they show it? I don't doubt for a second that they didn't have individual makeups for every single person because of, budgetary constraints.
Yeah.
So that's that. I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm used to Doctor Who having a bit of a low budget. I'm willing to forgive that. I'm willing to say, oh, okay, well, this is just like, I don't know, almost like a metaphor for all the diseases. Just as long as they look generally ill, that's fine. That's just the manifestation of all these diseases. That makes sense.
Yeah, I don't think I would have noticed or even really cared that much if they hadn't shone such a light on Petrifold regression.
Mm,
The doctors. That's the thing that spurs the Doctor into action. It's like there's not meant to be a cure for this for 1,000 years, and here they are curing it.
mm,
What's going on?
mm,
And then the episode largely drops Petrifold regression.
mm. Yeah, I mean, pardon me. Yeah, yeah, I guess that makes sense. Also, this is a smaller thing, maybe even a nitpick, but like, they say every disease,
Hmm.
but they obviously just mean, um infectious disease, right? Because there's
Yeah,
more diseases than just infectious ones.
yeah, that's true.
Um, did they even say that isn't there even an implication that they're all like viruses or something? It was like there are way more types of infections than viruses. There's parasites and fungal infections and bacteria and God knows what else. Not to mention the fact that,
Well,
5 billion years into the future, there could be like 100 different classes of diseases that humanity has discovered. So who knows?
yeah, well, that's the other thing.
Hmm.
I think viruses are like characterized by the ability to spread through air, right?
I think most diseases, I think, have the ability to do that. I don't know if viruses are more
Contact based.
easily, yeah, are more easily spread that way. Although it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, we're living through COVID, so
Well, yeah, because that's the other
yeah.
thing. Like the whole thing with COVID was like, you know, wear a mask because that's like how the virus spreads through like
Mm.
uh,
Bioaerosol.
bioaerosol exactly.
Mm.
Um, and yet it would appear that in the year 5 billion, every single disease or virus or bacteria, however you want to call it, are unable to spread through air, but
Mm.
but spread through touch. Um, Another thing I couldn't really
Yeah.
get my head around because it's like, no, well, the doctor mentions the air is sterile, so that's how
Mm.
they're safe to be around, but
Yeah.
that doesn't track, right? Like, unless the air is being constantly re-sterilized,
Mm.
which he doesn't
Mm.
say. He may have meant that, but he didn't say it.
Mm.
Like, surely just being around people who have every single disease, that should be enough, right? To
Yeah.
to
Like.
catch at least something.
Yeah. Like, I think when they see, the Doctor and Cassandra, technically, when they see the infected person in the containment area, when he says, "Oh yeah, there's like it's a sterilized field, just don't touch them," that I can just believe. But when they're all roaming the hospital, um, you know, posing a clear and serious threat to people, that is a little bit
Yeah,
harder to believe because again, you think every like yeah, if it's every disease, there must be some disease that's spread through bioaerosol, like, or if as you say, if there is something that stops um, diseases being spread through bioaerosol and it's only through touch, because it's future space thing, they didn't establish that really at all, so it becomes a bit harder to believe, and I do wonder whether or not because we're living through a pandemic, we notice these things more than we
maybe
may have a decade ago. That's entirely possible, but that still doesn't make it any more factually accurate, if
inaccurate.
that makes
Yeah,
sense.
that's yeah, it's
Yeah.
true. Um,
So
but
yeah, that's
also,
an issue.
I mean, if the other thing is it spreads through touch, and then
Mm,
later on the Doctor is put in one of the containment pods,
mm.
and that one of the infected had been in previously. I think it might be the same pod that got incinerated.
Hmm.
Um, but like and the stuff that he's touching, it must have like remnants on it, right?
Yeah, it looks filthy as
It looks
hell.
filthy and
So,
gross, and again, he's
mm,
fine. So it's like
mm.
biological touch, even
Well,
though
even
like pathogens can stay on inanimate objects for not as long as they
yeah, and
can
so
in
yeah,
the
on
body, but
surfaces for
for they can for some time,
yeah.
unless
I mean,
the incineration is something that destroyed all pathogen as well. That's a possibility. I mean, it is the year 5 billion,
mm,
but
and
then it
yeah,
does look filthy in there. So
yeah, like you can see what they're trying to do, but they're not quite establishing it clearly enough. But even with Chip, he hides inside one of the things. So
mm.
is he now infected? And I don't think it's the same one that got the incineration treatment. So
No, it's just a random one.
yeah, so what happened to him? And the weird thing is, I mean, they would have had to do a bit of maneuvering for this, but Chip dies in the end. Couldn't have they established, oh, he's been infected, so that's why he's dying so quickly? I mean,
Well,
again, they would have had to
that's
change everything, but
exactly, yeah. That's a bit tricky
yeah,
because then when he goes back in time, he's
yeah,
potentially
that's true.
infecting
Then
many
everybody
more
else,
people.
yeah, that would have been a whole crazy thing. But yeah, but the point is, there's rules here and logics that just aren't quite being followed through enough. And there's another element that I'll add to this as well. And initially I just said, oh, Nick, this is just a nitpick you're talking about here. But now that we've established this, I'm thinking maybe it isn't so much. So when the doctor puts um, all the cures in the washing
Yep, I was gonna get to this as
systems,
well.
sorry,
I was gonna get to this as well, but you go on.
yeah, he says he knows a bit about medicine. Is he not afraid of drug interactions?
Well, not just drug
Uh,
interactions, but from the looks of how we've seen these uh, anti-pathogen thingies interact before,
hmm,
like they've been hooked up into people's veins.
mm.
They're designed to like go in a person's
Yeah, yeah,
blood.
like that. There's a difference. It's like it would be like saying, because the cleaning things in the elevators are meant to for sterilization, right? That'd
Yes.
be like saying, oh, you've got sepsis here. Let me inject some antibacterial hand wipe into your veins.
Or it would be like saying, hey, COVID's out and about, but it's okay because you can inject disinfectants into your body to fight it. But who on earth would ever say that, even if they were the
Mm,
leader of the free world?
yeah. It just yeah. There's just something about it that
Yeah,
doesn't
it doesn't
quite
work.
fit.
But
Yeah.
then also like the way that the elevator disinfectant works, it's like
Hmm.
it showers you in it, like it covers you
Mm,
pretty much head to toe. It's like
mm,
this full shower that is designed to get every little germ and pathogen off your body.
hmm,
But then when it's being spread around amongst the infected, it's like one touch is all it takes.
mm.
That doesn't
Well,
track
maybe
either.
maybe the cures are just that good.
They're just that good. The cat nuns have done such an amazing job.
Yeah.
That but one touch of these antibacterials on the outside of your body cures you instantly. But we can't do that to our patients. We're gonna have to inject them with it, which is gonna take slower, and that'll help keep our cover.
Well, well, again, that's kind of the thing. Maybe the excuse there is that, excuse me, again, they want to um, facilitate, like, administer these drugs in a proper way with protocol, because obviously you can't just inject random shit into people's bodies, otherwise, God knows what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But again, like I said, was the doctor not concerned about drug interactions? I mean, maybe like I could sort of just believe that element because I'm like, oh, okay, well maybe the technology in the medicine is so advanced that drug interactions aren't a problem because that's just how the
I mean,
chemicals are designed.
yeah,
But
that's a possibility. But like
mm,
you mentioned before, the doctor says that he knows something about medicine, and that's thrown in there to make you think, okay, he knows what he's doing. He's doing something clever.
mm,
But all he does is pour all the things into the one vat. Like you don't need to know enough about a lot about medicine to do that. Anyone can do it. Like the line
mm,
"I know a little bit about medicine" implies that he's going to do something like to
Pitch.
affect the chemical composition in some way to make this work
Yeah.
a little bit better.
Mm.
Not just do what every child does the first time they try to cook something and just throw as many ingredients in as possible because
Yeah,
more
yeah.
is better.
No, yeah, it's not yeah, what's that weird Roald Dahl story like George's
Oh
Marvelous
yeah, George's
Medicine or
Marvelous
something?
Medicine. Yeah,
So,
I want to
yeah,
see. I want to see Hollywood try a live action version of that story, just because I know that it would be terrible, but I want to see how they can pull that off.
I Oh God.
Come on, there's more
Anyways,
Roald Dahl stories than Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and the BFG. You can do it.
yeah. Um
Adapt the
anyway, yeah,
Twits
the
next. That's a great story.
try what, pardon?
Adapt the Twits. That's an amazing story.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh
I just
God.
had a thought. And maybe this works against my previous argument, but like
Mm.
they've clearly got a cure for petrifold regression.
Hmm.
So maybe they don't have to infect the stock with that disease anymore, and that's why none of them are showing out with signs.
Maybe.
Yeah,
Um
the doctor says they've got
mm,
every disease, but that might just be like a catch-all for, well, I might as well just say they've got every disease because for all intents and purposes they do.
mm, mm. Um that could be hampered a little bit by the fact that, the doctor says, "Oh, the cure for that won't be available for another 1,000 years." So I don't know.
Well, they're clearly keeping it a
I guess,
secret in the hospital, and they
yeah.
do cure the Duke of New York, so
Mm,
they did figure it out.
mm,
But it makes sense once you've figured out. Okay,
mm,
we've cured this thing.
mm,
Let's not infect any
mm,
other of our livestock with it because we can focus on trying to cure the other stuff that
mm,
we haven't quite cured yet. You know.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I guess that makes sense. So yeah. But as you say,
But
there's just
that's just one leap in logical plot hole that we've sorted out. There are still
mm,
at least rather three
mm,
that we've brought up that don't have easy answers. And look,
yeah,
if
yeah,
a story had like one of these leaps in logic, I probably would look past it. But we have brought up
sure.
so many,
Hmm.
it is hard to then take the leap from A to B to go. Okay, well,
Mm,
I you know. I think for the emotional payoff, but even putting aside the Cassandra stuff before,
mm,
in that moment when they're all passing it along and you know, they've never been touched and they're all going around and curing each other. Then one of them comes around and hugs the doctor and he's giving his big speech about, it's a new subspecies, life will out. Like, it's
mm,
an effective scene, but it's hard to fully, properly accept it because of what it's taken to get there.
mm. Yeah, you wonder. I don't know. Could it have been helped if they, instead of making it hordes of infected people, if they made it just a couple of infected people with a few diseases that they were trying to cure? I wonder if that would have made it
I
more
mean,
believable.
maybe, but that's not as, like, grand as saying, there's
Yeah,
this
yeah.
horde of
Infected
patients that
zombie
have got
people.
every disease known in the
Mm,
universe.
mm.
It kind of lowers the stakes dramatically if it's like there's three guys and they've got mumps, measles, and gout.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, it again, it could have been helped by that, but and this is kind of where Doctor Who sometimes sort of leans into the spectacle because that's essentially what they're doing here with the infected zombie uh people.
Yeah,
That they are going for spectacle again, just to go back to that one shot of the
the glass.
horde scratching
Yeah.
at the glass door. That's kind of pretty clear what they're doing there.
Hmm.
Um, so obviously they'd have to sacrifice that. And in a way, if they narrowed it down, they would kind of have to make it even more serious because there's almost, I don't know, there would almost be like a race against time thing. It's like, oh, these are the experiments and they're probably going to suffer and die, but the doctors are going to try and save them, and then that just makes the whole thing a lot more thematically serious.
Yeah.
So that's a whole other kettle of fish that they would have had to deal with. So yeah, I guess maybe I don't know if I'd call this a compromise because I obviously can't tell what the thought was in the writing process of this story. But um, given they couldn't do that other wacky idea, this kind of works. But as we've said, there are just leaps in logic that aren't quite gelling together.
Yeah, and it's a shame
Um,
because, like,
yeah.
if not for those leaps in logic, it's not a boring episode. Like, it's got a
No,
decent
no,
pace.
it's entertaining.
It's got a good pace.
Mm,
Uh, it does a good job heightening the stakes as it goes along. Um,
mm.
and I think that overall the B story with Cassandra is quite strong.
Yeah, for sure.
I
And
guess we'll talk about her now. I guess.
and I will say that it's it is very compelling, and it's a very sort of Doctor Who story, if that makes sense. Like there's certain things that happen in this episode. I mean, certainly by 2006, I wouldn't say that they were unique, but they're like, oh yeah, like here's the wacky stuff. Like villain comes back and swaps bodies with some other character. Yeah, that's just Doctor Who, man. That's just the wacky stuff that it does. But it
Yeah.
all sort of comes together and works and is quite compelling in itself. So
hmm
that I quite like.
That all that
But
being
yeah, let's
said,
talk.
like the
Hmm.
spectrograph is what she uses to get out of her own body and into Rose. But once the spectrograph is gone, how is she able to just manifest into red mist and move into people as she wills? Is that
I assume that's just what the is it called
spectrograph
the
does?
psychograph or the spectrograph?
Psychograph.
Yeah,
That's it. Yeah,
yeah.
psychograph.
I assume that's just one of the side effects of the psychograph, but again, it's one of these things where, well, if that's the case, then why didn't they establish that a little bit clearer? It's one of those things where
I
if
mean,
it
well,
is,
I don't know if. Well, she does mention that she's going to leave Rose when she finds someone else. So I guess it was
mm,
kind of established that she could.
mm,
I mean, maybe she needs to
mm,
use the machine once in order to gain the
yeah,
capability, and then after that,
yeah,
she can just basically exist as a consciousness until her body dies.
yeah, it is a little strange. Like I don't know, did if it's a thing that can be used multiple times, did she need Rose to be to get backed against the wall into the machine. Yeah, there's a few questions with it, I guess, but it's
Yeah,
not something that really bothers me terribly. I
no,
can
not
believe,
as much
okay, well,
as not as much as the other hospital stuff, at least.
mm, mm, yeah, I can at the very least just say, okay, well, year 5 billion 23, and by the way, how funny is that we're recording it in this episode in 2023? But anyway, um, so, but I can believe, oh, okay, I guess that's just what technology is. Maybe she does only need to use it once, and it's one of those things where I don't know where she got the technology, and it's never really established. But um, I mean, like, is she stealing it from the hospital? Maybe she did, but like, the way the technology works, it's both effective enough that I can believe it only needs to be used once, but it still looks like sort of almost cobbled together technology or stolen technology. So the
Yeah,
point is, it all just works enough for me. It's noticeable, but it's not something that certainly not something that ruins the episode for me.
yeah. I mean, I will say it's a bold choice for this being the first episode of a new season, especially when you consider that David Tennant was out of action for much of the Christmas invasion. To then have your first regular episode again split up the Rose and the new Doctor. We don't have
Mm,
a lot of time to sort of establish the dynamic that the new Doctor is going to have with Rose,
mm,
which maybe works in the episode's favor because it sort of leads the audience to go, okay, so things are still going to be roughly the same between the two of them. There isn't going to be any huge
mm,
changes in the status quo to that regard. Um, Something which the change from Matt Smith to Capaldi with Clara's character, it did address. There was a bit of a change in the way that they treated each other after that.
mm.
But here it's just kind of like, okay, so it's a new Doctor, but because we're not really shining a light on the Doctor companion relationship in this, we can pretty much assume that the way they're going to interact with each other is largely going to remain the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know. It's just something that I saw in one of the Timescales reviews where they were like, "Why would you split them up so soon after a regeneration? We want to see how their dynamic is going to change." To me, it's just like, well, they're not shining a light on it, so clearly it's not going to change, and we can accept that
Mm.
and move on.
Yeah, sure. Um, yeah, I think. Yeah, like, well, then, like you say, they're not. they're not trying to present this as like a massive shake-up between Doctor and companion.
Yeah.
Um, this is I don't know if I'd say it's like a full-on sci-fi romp, but it's a fairly typical episode for Doctor Who. So I don't think they were trying to do anything, really radical or and it's more, and because Rose isn't in it a lot, it's more of a Doctor focused episode. Maybe I say that mainly because I know roughly what his character growth is going to be like over the next few seasons. Like I
Yeah.
really love the bit um, where like the little bits like the face of Bo will talk to the lonely god, and then the Doctor says, you want a higher authority, there is no higher authority, and that kind of works in sort of later because like you correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't it like that's like a big thing of David Tennant's character arc? Like it's wondering, well, yeah, should the Doctor have this much power? Is he the final authority, and should he be? Because
Well, that's
um,
definitely going to become very important in Waters of Mars.
mm,
But I think the larger point about the Tenth Doctor's characterization is, despite the fact that he has so many companions and so many, secondary companions and side characters that come back over the course of his run, he is characterized as being a very lonely person.
mm,
And that I think that's sort of being seeded here when they're talking like the face of Bo will talk to someone like him, the last of his
mm,
kind, a
mm,
wanderer, the lonely god.
mm,
That is, I think that is the stuff that's kind of being set up, and I believe it is being set up on purpose, because by this
oh
point you
yeah,
have to assume
yeah,
that Russell T Davies knows what he's going to do with the face of Bo. He's set
yeah,
up the face of Bo's third appearance. He's introduced the face of Bo's ability to speak telepathically, which hasn't existed before, because he
mm,
knows that at some point he's going to bring it back and it's going to be very important, and he's going to tie it into Jack's arc.
mm,
And that story with the Master, which involves all that which involves those people, is going to lead
mm,
into David Tennant's Regeneration episode.
mm.
I 100% believe that all this stuff is being established on purpose
Yeah,
to
yeah, absolutely.
highlight what will become one of this Doctor's defining traits.
Mm. Yeah, so it's more. So you would say it's more the lonely part they're foreshadowing rather than the God part.
Yeah, because all of that God
Mm,
stuff with in Waters of Mars, all that stuff only happens because he doesn't have a companion. Like, when he
mm,
is on his own, he that's when he allows himself to uh,
mm,
go a bit more off the deep end. Um, and again, Waters of Mars is such a fantastic episode for
mm,
being so late in a Doctor's run with so much established. It's so good.
mm.
Um, and I hate that we've got so long to wait until we can talk about it properly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we talk Cassandra. Yeah. One thing it does do, it allows both David Tennant and Billy Piper to do their best uh, impersonations
Yeah.
of
Which is
Cassandra.
which is which is very very funny.
Yeah, they both do a decent enough job imitating her.
Mm.
I'm just looking up the actor's name. Who is she? I don't know who she is. Zoe Wanamaker.
Right. Um. But yeah, they do a pretty good job, and it is very funny and strange. Like like when she's like, oh, how does this woman speak? And it's like English Cockney. And she's like, ah, watcher. Yes,
Yeah,
governor. I will proceed up the apples and pears,
yeah,
which
that
is
stuff is
just great.
yeah,
And it does kind of feed in again to the classist sort of element of Cassandra. It's like, oh yes, this is how a chav talks,
yeah.
and it's very funny. And David Tennant doing impersonation of her. I actually don't think it's quite as good as what Billy Piper's able
No.
to do, but it's still very entertaining
Well, Billy Piper, I
and
assume, had to
funny.
put much more work into it because she's doing it for a bulk of the episode, whereas David Tennant
Mm,
is only doing it for about 2 minutes.
yeah, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. I think it's
But
important that it's one of the few times that the Doctor sort of takes a villain on as a companion. it's like it's not for very long, obviously, but Cassandra is sort of playing the companion role in the story. You know,
Mm.
accompanying the Doctor around, helping him out. One of my favorite moments is when he tells Cassandra, "You're so keen to stay alive. Why don't you live a little?" Because like
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
that's
that was
that's
great.
his philosophy. That's it there.
Hmm. Yes, I'd agree, and I think yeah, it's just a nice little fun bit of characterization, and it's even there's something cathartic about it because like if you think, oh, if I was there, would I be able to embrace that spirit of adventure, and go with the Doctor? And you think, well, I guess if Cassandra could do it, maybe I could too. So there's
Yeah,
something
well,
quite endearing about that.
yeah, well, we've talked about Cassandra's moment of empathy after she leaves the body of the infected,
Mm.
and I think it's important that that's sort of when the turning point of the Doctor, the way he treats her, like that sort of changes after that as well. You know,
Yeah.
because before that point, he's nothing but hostile. He's like, leave Rose's body right now, or I will not even open this door to help save our lives.
Well,
But
that's
then after that point, he's
mm,
more than willing to let her stay in Rose's body for a
yeah.
while. He lets her help out with what you know
Mm.
with what he's doing, and in general, he becomes a lot more agreeable with Cassandra. Like he's that's the moment where he shifts from you know it's not my problem if you don't have a body anymore. Everyone dies eventually. It's your time now.
Mm.
Instead, what he shifts to, maybe we can go back to New York. They can build you
Mm.
a
A new
something or
body can
other,
stand trial.
and your body
Yeah.
can stand trial. Exactly. That's when he shifts, and I think that's an important moment because, like, as with a lot of like the Doctor's attitude towards people changes a lot based on their capacity to change because like the Daleks have
Mm.
no capacity to change. They all will always be what they are. So he will always treat them with the utmost hostility.
Mm.
But someone like Cassandra, who has shown empathy for the first time, he's like, okay, so
Mm.
there's clearly something more here that I can connect
Mm.
with.
Yeah,
So I'm
sure.
going to, and we'll see it. Strangely, the first example I have of this is in the 11th Doctor story, Dinosaurs on a Spaceship, which I grant you is an insane pull going off of what I've just said. But when we get to that episode, there's a moment towards the end that a lot of people have issue with that I don't, and it's the way
Mm-hmm.
that the Doctor deals with the villain of that story.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine you don't remember it. I don't even know if you've ever seen that episode or not.
I don't think I have. That
Yeah,
was in the wilderness years, put it
yeah,
one way.
yeah. We'll
So
get to that
yes,
eventually, but that's the
yeah, yeah.
first moment that I thought of, and it's like, okay, so this is a constant characterization with the Doctor. If
Mm,
you are shown to
mm,
be a low life piece of shit with no capacity for growth, he will not give you a second chance, or even he won't give you the time of day. But if you show you know empathy and even just the potential for that, he will generally be a lot more lenient.
Well, well, that's the interesting thing because, and we even talked about this with the Christmas Invasion. He says that that's the kind of man I am, no second chances. But like, that doesn't,
Yeah, immediately that's reversed.
it doesn't map on to this story, and I'm glad it doesn't because
Oh
I
no, me
do
too. Yeah,
prefer this Doctor certainly, and the way
same.
they handle it, um, in this episode specifically is done really well. But it is a little strange that they
Well,
do
I don't know necessarily
try
if
to
it is
establish
because like
that.
well we're talking about you know the Doctor being hostile on people who show no capacity for growth, and
Mm,
very clearly the Sycorax leader doesn't show that capacity. The Doctor
mm,
gives him a chance to be like leave in peace, but he
mm,
doesn't take that chance. He charges the Doctor with a
mm,
sword. So he's like, okay, you clearly have no. There's clearly nothing human to you, for the lack of a better phrase,
mm,
beneath you that I can connect with and reason with. Therefore, there's no point in keeping you alive because you're not going to become a better person. All you're going to do is spread more suffering and death.
mm,
You die now. Whereas
mm,
Cassandra does show that element of human connection deep, deep, deep down
mm.
that the Doctor can connect to and go, okay, I can use this to help you
Yeah,
be better.
I guess so because like like he obviously was sort of willing to let her die the last time they met, but that's
Yep.
after she'd done all these terrible things. But just the way this episode is constructed and the weird circumstances that they were in, she was actually able to show him that capacity for change. So maybe it doesn't feel like consistent compared to what he was in the last episode, but maybe it actually is when you know, unpack it a little bit.
Yeah, I don't
So,
know. I mean, I guess we'll have to just examine that side of the Tenth Doctor moving forward because it's before I watched Christmas Invasion a couple weeks ago for the podcast. It's not something that I really considered that much regarding 10 because I think it's something I forgot about when we were watching the Christmas Invasion. It's like, oh, hang on, does this is this an element of the character that's gonna continue forward? And maybe it's been abandoned. Maybe there's something a bit deeper. I don't know. It's something we'll have to keep an eye on moving forward.
for sure.
I feel sorry for Chip though.
Yeah, poor.
Like he has
Poor
like
Chip.
Cassandra dies, but he also does, and he doesn't. He's not even conscious for it. Like it's a shame. Like he was bred to be a servant to
He was bred to
Cassandra.
be flesh.
Yeah, he was bred
much
to be
like
flesh, and it's yeah. Is it thematic?
I think it is.
Well, he doesn't necessarily get the same ending that the infected do.
No, but I think he still serves that sort of similar purpose. He's born, you know,
To
to
die.
serve, and he doesn't have a chance to, you know, enact a life of his own. So
Yeah,
I
I guess,
think,
but then like the ending is painted as a positive one for Cassandra, even though like it's if it is thematic, it's the same thing that the nuns were doing, and that is shown in a bad light. I don't know. I mean,
I'm
it's a nice enough ending for Cassandra that I'm generally willing to sort of look past it if it
yeah,
is
yeah.
meant to be a thematic thing. But I don't even necessarily think that it is really. I think it's just two uh, coincidentally similar character creation tools.
I think I see what you mean, but I do think that there is a bit of a connection there. I mean, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I think yeah, that there has to be some sort of thematic link there. That again, Chip is similarly to the infected. He's just meant to, you know, to serve and to be, you know, a host. I suppose
Yeah,
you could say. I feel like, again, maybe I'm analyzing it too much, but I feel like there's something there, especially when
there
you put
might
it into
be.
context with, you know, the sort of the classist element of Cassandra's character, that she's totally willing to, you know, step over other people for her own nasty sort of self-interest. So I think there's something there, um, but yeah.
I mean, did they like establish because like I don't think the word clone was used at any point to describe either the infected or Chip. So they're not like clone bred, but there is some kind of living tissue kind of thing. Cause they're
Yeah.
both like artificial creations that are given real sentience and life.
Mm.
And whether or not it's the same process, I can't really say for certain. It would make sense if. Oh no, that's probably what it is. Because Cassandra's hiding out in the hospital, she might have been able to use the same technology that the nuns are using
To make, yeah.
to create Chip, and she creates
Yeah.
Chip in the image that she saw of her favorite person, the last person to tell her she was beautiful. It's another like it's a time travel paradox loop that Moffat loves to use, which is the closed loop, the predestination, the bootstrap paradox. And I'm surprised to see RTD using it long before Moffat did, because I
Yeah,
don't think
but I
it's something that
think
RTD does much in the future. He doesn't really bootstrap his arcs or his stories like that. He kind of does with the Face of Bo in a weird way, because the Face of Bo only said to the Doctor what he said because Jack had heard that's what the Face of Bo said.
right.
Because otherwise, there's no reason why the Face of Bo wouldn't have gone right. The Master's alive. Here's what you need to know. Instead, he just says you are not alone, and that plays into the season 3 finale. I think that's the only example of a bootstrap paradox I can think of Russell T Davies using beside this one. I can't think of any others because otherwise his time travel logic is largely, he likes to use the time can be rewritten aspect of time travel. Like it's weird that the Doctor Who uses multiple different time travel logic concepts in the same world. Sometimes it'll be predestination, sometimes it'll be time is in flux, Sometimes it'll be time can be rewritten. Sometimes time is fixed.
Mm.
I don't know. It's just a weird thing with the show.
Yeah, I think yeah, given how long the show is, it would be a little bit of a leap to expect it to be totally consistent
Oh, definitely.
in that regard.
I don't
So,
have a problem with it. In general, they just use
mm.
whichever time travel method is best for the story.
And even like even when Moffat has the Doctor explain, that time is wibbly wobbly, timey wimey stuff, that kind of it's almost like a blanket attempt to take care of all those weird inconsistencies, I guess,
Yeah,
and it
like it's,
works well
phrasing it
enough.
phrasing it like that is just a way of saying don't think about it. Time is weird.
Yeah, yeah, I'd agree.
Um, I'm trying to think. Is there anything else about this episode that needs addressing? I don't know if there is. Like, it's 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 a largely what you see is what you get episode. It's a story about a
Yeah.
hospital. That's what it is.
Mm.
Um,
I think having the again those nice little thematic class elements show up. They are a little bit surprising,
yeah, I
but
guess.
they're you get the impression of most of them on a first watch anyway. Like it's
Mm.
not. I don't know if it's something that you're going to be picking over for ages or it's like, oh yes, this is a great dissection of whatever it may be. I think
Yeah,
you
there's
get that impression on the first watch, as it is anyway.
yeah, it's a pretty standard story. It's not something that does groundbreaking things with sci-fi.
Yeah,
It's not something that explores deep thematic character relationships or situations
yeah,
to
absolutely.
a huge degree anyway, like Doctor Who
Mm.
has and will do.
Yeah,
Um, is it a better season opener than Rose was? I don't think it is.
that is a really good question.
Because like
Um,
even
hmm,
because I don't know what this episode does for like it obviously sets up Face of Bow stuff for the future, but it doesn't really
yeah,
do much to establish stuff for this season of Doctor Who. There's no Torchwood reference. There's no teasing
mm,
Rose's departure.
mm,
It kind of sets up Mickey, but that's something that's very very small at the beginning.
mm, yeah,
So I
yeah,
don't even I don't even know if it's that impressive season opener. I mean,
mm.
because also the
In the
previous
context of the rest of it,
just in the context of season two, because the
mm,
Christmas invasion ended with Rose saying that she was going to keep traveling with the Doctor, which is
mm.
something that you don't really need to watch this episode to know that they follow up on. So arguably, like if you're just considering season two, you can skip this and you're not going to miss anything.
Yeah,
And in that sense, it's really unique among season openers because I can't really
mm,
think of any other first story of a season that hasn't been very important for that season.
mm. Yeah. I mean, I yeah, I think that makes sense. I
Like
feel
if you
like
if you don't have Rose, if you don't show Rose leaving with the Doctor at the start of the episode, I could see this episode fitting perfectly in around like the episode 6 or 7 spot where it's like we need a filler episode, just
yeah,
throw this one in.
yeah, it's not very. As I said, a fairly generic sort of Doctor Who episode, like for Doctor Who.
Yes,
A little weird in the context of other forms of sci-fi, but like for Doctor Who, like I said, even things like with like the psychograph. By this point, you can fairly expect something that strange to pop up in it. It's not doing anything that's super innovative or really exciting or anything like that. So
yeah,
um, yeah, it is a very ho hum sort of Doctor Who episode. Like it's a Doctor Who episode, not a bad one, but just kind of an episode. With flaws as we've discussed,
yeah.
but that's broadly speaking what it is. I Here's the thing. I feel like the bits that I enjoy in this episode, I enjoy more than most of the stuff in Rose, but Rose, you could argue, is a better sort of a maybe an overall better episode, a more consistently good episode than this, and it's certainly yeah, it establishes more as an opener episode
Yeah, well,
than this does, and not just because it's the first episode of the revival.
yeah, well, we're going to move on to rankings now, and I honestly still don't know where
Sure.
I'm going to put it because I don't think like I was certainly it's not as boring as something like The Long Game was. Like it held my
Hmm.
attention throughout,
Hmm.
and I don't even think it's not as world breaking as Boomtown was either. But I think
Hmm.
individually, like as an isolated story, there's more
Hmm.
problems with the narrative in this than a lot of the stuff was in season one. Maybe even those episodes that I mentioned.
Hmm.
So I don't know if I don't know if I like. My instinct was to give it a five, but I think that would put it below like heaps of those season one stories that I don't think I enjoyed as much as this.
Hmm.
So maybe I'll go with a six. I don't know. Like I know that the content of the story, like in terms of a narrative, isn't worth the six that I'm giving it. But like
Hmm.
for character stuff and a few of the thematic elements and the B story,
Hmm.
it is. So I don't know. Like it's a for me, it's like a six with a question mark.
I think that's fair though, because I think um those other elements they do count.
Yeah,
I think, and
certainly.
if it's helping you engage with the story, even if the plot itself is a little so-so, that's I think that's fine. I think that's certainly justifiable.
Yeah,
I'm
good
tempted to
point.
give it a. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying that's a good point.
Hmm. I'm tempted to give it a six as well. The only reason why I may hesitate is because when I think of it like a solid six that we've covered so far, I think the Leisure Hive, which
Yeah,
flawed though it was, I think we both said yeah, like we really enjoyed the good parts of that story. Again, not perfect, a lot of
no.
problems, but it was a really enjoyable um, story with lots of strange things that even if they didn't add up, it's like oh, this is kind of really cool and even conceptually, there's some strange things that's going on here. So, and I enjoyed that more than this. So I am a little torn.
I know. Well, we
I
don't do things by like fractions, but
no.
timescales gave it a 5.8, and if we're like
Hmm.
maybe it's not a six, I guess that 5.8 was like pretty accurate to how we feel about it. Then
Yeah, I think look like you, I'm going to give it a bit of a tentative six. Let's put it that way.
sure, yeah, it's a six with an
Yeah,
asterisk
yeah,
because I think if we allowed decimals, I think 5.5 is like right where this episode belongs.
yeah,
But I don't think it's a five. I lean more towards a six than a five because I leave fives for stuff that like really didn't like leave an impact on me in any way. Like
yeah,
fives are the straight down the middle. It wasn't good. It wasn't bad. It was just there. And I think this
yeah,
episode is slightly more good than it is bad. So
yeah. Sure.
yeah, that's where we'll leave it. And we're not. I'm just going to move on because otherwise we'll be sitting here second guessing ourselves all day about this episode.
Yeah, fair enough. So
Um,
yeah, so tentative six.
Yep, and that's New Earth in the books.
Uh
Season
huh.
two. We've started season two. I'm excited to continue season two of this show because I know that there's some
Hmm.
good stuff coming up, and some shockers, but we'll get to them next
It'll be
week.
fun either way.
Yep.
I think.
But next week on the show we are continuing our Davros retrospective, and we're moving on to Destiny of the Daleks, the final Dalek story from Tom Baker's era.
Yes, that is what we are doing, and it will be something.
It'll be something, yeah.
Uh,
Until then, I'm Alex.
I'm Fitz.
And now that we've officially started David Tennant, I can sign off with Allons-y.
Great.